Welcome on into OneSoccer.ca, everybody. Andi Petrillo alongside Kaylyn Kyle, Laura Armstrong. We have the Arnold Clark Cup that we're going to get into. We have the Under-20 Championship that we're going to touch on as well. But we do have to talk about a really big topic here because, as we know, very sad, very frightening. Russia invading Ukraine. There have been a ton of civilian lives that have been lost, and the world has responded very quickly. That includes the sports world as well. There has been a ripple effect. And most recently, when it comes to the world of soccer, we know that UEFA and FIFA putting out a joint statement saying that they have banned Russia from all competitions until further notice. So this is something we're going to touch on. Obviously, there's a little bit of a side note there when it comes to the Russian women's team in the European Championships that will be held this July. But before we get to that, Laura, was this the right decision by the governing bodies?
Yeah, I think it absolutely was the right decision by the governing bodies. And you can't help but feel for the athletes who, played on that team. You can't help but feel for the fact that they're, for example, the women's team, if they don't get to play this summer, then, they work to get there. But at the end of the day, sport is a privilege and it also has power. And I think that those two things are very important to acknowledge in this situation. There's meaning when Russia gets games taken away. There's meaning when they're outside of these huge, massive businesses. And I also think, if you're invading another country, you don't get the privilege of sport. It's as simple as that. And so I think that this was the right decision. There was a couple of days where we were sort of asking, will they or won't they? They eventually did. We'll see what happens with the women's team. But I think that at the end of the day, sport is something that you get nice things when you're behaving nicely. And what we can say about Russia right now is that they certainly are not behaving nicely. So it's definitely important, I think, for sports to take a stance. And further than just putting out a statement condemning what Russia's doing, they're showing action here, which I think is important for sure.
And just going off Laura's point there, I think you nailed a lot of the main points. But I think if this shows anything, that FIFA and UEFA weren't going to make a stance until athletes started coming out, until teams starting coming out, until organizations, federations started putting out these things, and then they changed their tone. Originally, it was just Russia. They were to play on neutral ground, have their badge taken off their jersey, and not be able to play their national anthem. Since all these teams and everyone's taken to Twitter and put out these stances, even Canada Soccer has put out one, which I'm so proud to be Canadian because, like you alluded to, Laura, it is a privilege to be an athlete. And although you feel very bad for these players that might not be able to play in the Euros or might not be able to play in a World Cup, at the end of the day, this is so much bigger than sport. This is so much bigger than athletes. And as a player, if I'm a Russian athlete, on any of these teams, I wouldn't even want to put on my national team jersey. I'm not proud of my country if I'm one of those players. Again, I don't know what goes on within that country, if there's scare tactics behind these athletes and why a lot of these athletes haven't come out and said anything. So I can't touch on individuals, but I will say hats off to players that have taken a stance. You look at big name players scoring this weekend, holding their jersey, no more war. I think it says a lot. And I think it says a lot about what sport does. And a lot of people saying, well, these people want to watch games on the weekend to give them hope. These people want to feel safe in their own country, first and foremost. So if it is, boycotting games, coaches stepping away from their teams, we're obviously seeing it with Dynamo Kiev, the head coach there stepping away from his team, saying, I don't want to coach a team in a country that I don't have the same stance on. So I think a lot of these moving parts is moving sponsors, even taking the sponsors off their jersey. And it's all because players are standing up on social media and being outspoken on something that they are passionate about. I think what's going on in Ukraine is heartbreaking. I can't even go on Instagram or Twitter and look at images. It just literally breaks my heart that these women and children are literally trying to flee the country, but they can't. Canceled flights, can't get on trains, bombing going off. You go and you look and you're like, what century are we living in that a leader will go and make mass war in 2022? I think it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. And it truly is. And we've seen the world unite against what Russia is doing. And the side note there, obviously, just to elaborate a little bit more on the women's Russian team, they've already qualified for the European Championships, which are set to be held in July. when UEFA was asked to clarify if they have in fact been banned, they said they're still discussing that. Their first game is set to be July 9th. They're taking on Switzerland. Kaylyn, to your point, the Swiss have already stepped up and said, we will not play that game. So a lot of players, a lot of other nations, they're the ones that are also leading, saying, we will not play. So UEFA, FIFA, they'll find themselves in an interesting situation where, do you punish that team for not playing, or do you in fact, you got to remove Russia for that? And I'll also say this, as someone who was very much a part of the 2014 Sochi Olympics, and we all know what came out of that, and the proof of the state, sponsorship and the doping that went on there. The IOC has already gone down the path that FIFA wanted to go down originally, right? Which was eliminate the colors, eliminate the national anthem. Futile. It's done very little. And we can also just look at this most recent Olympics in Beijing with the controversy that went around the figure skater as well, and the doping situation there. And I know that the first response is always to say, well, it's unfair to these athletes. It's unfair. It's unfair. But Russia's been warned once, twice, thrice. We can go on how many times it's been warned. And let's not forget who the true culprit is here. It's not the governing bodies. It's not the federations banning Russia. It's Vladimir Putin. He did this to you. Don't ever forget who did this to you and is taking away your privilege to play sport. We cannot ever forget who the true monster and true culprit is here.
That gave me goosebumps. It's so true.
It's also important to remember too that, like, I mean, it's unfortunate to remember that this is a trend in sports that we're seeing right now. Like, if we talked about this last week, we talked about players having to step up, for example, pay equality, right? The onus a lot of times comes down to the players and to the athletes to be the people who step up. And that's what makes it very inspiring, but also very difficult, because you have those moments where you think sport is big business, and at the crux of it, we all want to think that sport is the heart and all the beautiful moments that we see, particularly over this past weekend. But at the end of the day, it is big business, and a lot of big business is dominated by a very small number of people in the world who have these kinds of connections at crazy levels. And it's very difficult to sort of, we romanticize sports a lot, right? And this is a moment where we have to remember that sports is not romantic, and it's disappointing when you see FIFA and UEFA have to, wait for athletes to step up. But at the same time, the power of social media in these moments is really incredible. And I think that if we didn't have social media the way that we do today, and if you don't have, for example, like a Wojciech Szczesny saying, I'm not going to play for Poland, and then there's a domino effect for, the rest of his teammates, and then eventually Poland pulling out of that game against Russia, I mean, you're maybe not seeing the same results today. So it's very interesting. And I think, we also have to remember that, we are not the number one sources. I feel like I've been saying this to everybody, all of my family members. We are not the number one sources on this war that's going on in Ukraine. And we need to make sure that people are following the proper sources. We just have, sports, the sports side of it. But there's definitely people, make sure you're following the right people when you're getting your information.
And just piggybacking off what you said, I think the one thing too is we talked about putting pressure on FIFA and UEFA. A lot of the time, they're just as corrupt as some of these governing bodies and some of these governments and these leaders. So, they've done a lot of good, but you look at all the corrupt things that they have done in the past as well. And finally, these big businesses that have multi-millions of dollars from Russian organizations, whether it's a kit sponsor, whether it's from oil, whether it's from this, that, or the other, pulling out. It's not about money anymore. It's about quality of life and treating people in the right way, and saying enough is enough. And I think this is the for me anyway, since I've been alive, it's the first time where I've seen companies do such a thing to Russia and not worry so much about big picture, big money. Are we going to hurt feelings of someone in Russia? And I think this could, I hope it is a turning point, and it's a wake-up call for UEFA and FIFA, that it's so much more about money at the end of the day. And you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these organizations, if it wasn't for these players that are bringing in this kind of revenue for you to host a World Cup. So I'm hoping that there's change in and around that. And I'm hoping there is a wake-up call with UEFA and FIFA.
Just to come, a little bit full circle, and also, to bring another side, if I can just speak without my feelings right now, it's also worth noting that even though these governing bodies can do this, these athletes do have, the Russian athletes that is, do have the ability to appeal. They can go to the court of arbitration for sport. So that can be the next step. To your point, if we're showing a united front, you would hope the CAS would do the exact same. But this is where things can get very tricky. This is where sometimes maybe governing bodies don't want to automatically ban Russia, or they say until further notice because of the legalities, the very real legalities that are consequences here. So again, we all know a lot of times what's right to do isn't always legally right to do. So this is where things can get complicated. But of course, to your point, Laura, we cover the sports end of it. We will continue to cover the sports end of it. And we will see where UEFA, FIFA land when it comes to the women's Russian team and the European Championships, which take place this July. Let's turn the corner now and put a bow on the Arnold Clark Cup. The Canadians were 1 win away. I said it again, Kaylyn. Boom.
I didn't have to say anything. Everyone knows tuning in. I still can't say it. I was practicing before, and I'm like, no, I'm not saying it.
I know. They might need to change that title. Just say it. But they were 1 win away from winning the whole thing. And I know it's like, well, easier said than done. It's not that easy to win. But the bottom line is, yes, they end up finishing third, but I feel where they are in the standings, how they finished in the standings is a wee bit deceiving because, again, they really just needed a good result against Spain that ended up being a loss for them. But when you look at that performance, Kaylyn, were questions answered for you? Did you learn anything new about this team? What did you see in those games played?
Yeah, I think for me, for Canada, we saw growth. I think that's the most important thing. And you saw growth without a player of Christine Sinclair there, which is extremely difficult to do against those teams. Because you look at the other tournaments that were going on, they didn't have the quality teams that the Arnold Clark Cup had. Got it, check. That they had. And I was actually pleasantly surprised because half of the women on the team were in the off season. The other half were mid-season. So you never really know how that's going to go. And especially with the NWSL, because the off season is so extremely long, especially coming off a massive win. Mentally, you're just fatigued. And then a big, long off-season, you just want to be with your family, your friends, a lot of players going back to cold places as well. So you're not getting that same training as opposed to maybe if you were in Spain or you were in Europe where you don't get 20 feet of snow and it's -30. So I think to get the win, the loss, and the draw against the teams that they did and the performances that they had, I think they can take their hats off and be happy. Do I think that there's definitely growth in the attacking side? 100%. Those pieces, I feel they're coming. But defensively, the one thing that Canada is we are so sound now. I'm never nervous in a 1v1 situation. I'm never nervous in that transitional moment. I'm never really nervous when that back line comes out because we have a lot of solid defenders. Now, I'm not being disrespectful to current teams, but defensively, Canada, it was always a little bit shaky. Who's our center back pairing? Who's going to step out there today? Now we kind of know what it's looking like going forward. Now the center back role, obviously we have 3 quality center backs. So that's going to, the question mark around there. But whatever 3 are starting, I know I'm going to get something different with either one of those players. Obviously, Kadisha Buchanan going to get penned right on that paper. But with the other 2, I'm okay with whoever starts because I think they're both class. I think our fullback position or wing back, whatever system we're playing, I think we have a lot of players that can fill that role. And we didn't have that in Canada. Now the goal scoring will come. Obviously, if you're a defensively sound team, it's only natural that you're able to move the ball up and instill confidence within your team to put the ball into the back of the net. And obviously, Adriana Leon returning to West Ham, her 50th game with them. She's going to be back. She's going to have a lot of time under her belt to get back and get that match fitness. And I think for me, yes, everyone calls her the super sub. I would love to see her start because I think she has what Canada is missing up top in that attacking third with Jordan Huitema, essentially.
Okay.
I feel like this team is a lot. We've been for years. I feel like even going back to John Herdman, we've been talking about this team and getting to the point where it's like, the devil's in the details, right? We just have to have the details. But there were points where it was like, there's more than we need than just details. Like it's not finishing touches, right? And this team feels a lot closer to finishing touches. So when you're talking about details, and details can be hard to achieve, of course, right? Like a detail can make or break a tournament, can make or break a World Cup, can make or break a gold medal. But I certainly feel like Canada is closer than it has ever been. And it showed that in Arnold Clark Cup for me. And I also think that we need to I think a lot of people look at Spain and they don't really think of Spain as, this giant in the women's game. So you're thinking, oh, Canada lost to Spain. Like that shouldn't be happening, right?
Champions League final 2 years in a row. I mean,
exactly. I don't think people recognize that Spain is, in my opinion, the fastest growing country in the women's game, right? And this is what is going to be interesting for me. When I was watching this game, I was thinking bigger picture, and I was thinking to myself, like, this is why Canada needs a domestic league, right? These are the teams that are going to, just to bring it back, just another time to bring it back to that domestic
Lori,
league.
keep bringing that back.
Like,
bringing it back.
Why? These are the teams that, you know, when players say we're concerned that we're going to fall out of the top 10, it's because of teams like, or countries like Spain, who have 2 professional women's leagues, like 2 divisions in professional women's soccer in Spain, and their team is killing it. So it's like, I just think, you know, that was a game that Canada, I think it kind of, the tournament sort of ended on maybe not sour, but like maybe a disappointing note after they sort of flew pretty high, I think, for the first 2 games. But it's because they were playing against a really good team. It's for all the reasons Kaylyn mentioned, people out of season, not having players. Can't wait for Adriana Leon to come back. I think she's going to be a really interesting addition to where this team is at now. But, you know, Spain is good. Spain's not to be underestimated. And if they go win Euro this summer, I will not be surprised.
Yeah, a lot of things there. I mean, obviously, I think we do want to still see, obviously, Canada score some more goals. But at the same time, we saw the emergence of Vanessa Gilles to the point where Bev Priestman said she had a chat with Zadorsky to be like, you are good enough to be in this squad. You're good enough to be in the starting 11. We're just making adjustments because of how Vanessa Gilles has stepped up. So it'll be interesting to see. And then she also said it's not out of the question. Remember, we brought this up last week that Shalina and Vanessa could be in the lineup at the same time. Woohoo! That's
what I'm saying, that 3-back with all of them, because they have all the qualities to get it done, and then good wingbacks with pace. Yeah. I mean, not even that those 3 are slow with their pace, because they're not. They're way quicker than me. I look like I was running with piano tied to my backside when I played. But we have so much pace at that back. I could see us playing with all 3 of them in a back 3. But my only concern is if one of them goes down injured and you've been working so hard with the 3 of them, then what do you do? It's a really tough decision for Bev Priestman to put all 3 of them on the pitch together just in case of injuries, because after those 3, the depth with that center back role, I just don't know who you would trust in a big game.
Well, the key then is to just not get injured. Easier said than done. No problem. Right, we're going to take a bit of a breath. We started off with a really heavy topic. We dissected the Arnold Clark Cup, and I want to have a little bit of fun here because, Kaylyn, I'm so sorry. We're going to pick on you with this one because you said something last week or didn't say something last week, and we just said, hey, why don't we make a segment out of it? If you missed last week and what you messed up, here it is.
Oh, God. Love that you said that. They're growing into this tournament. I'm not even going to try to say that because everyone knows I can barely speak English on a good day. But the one thing that Canada is doing in these tournaments, and we saw it at the Olympics, is they're grinding out results. And that adds so much fuel to their I'm going to screw up that saying, so I'm not even going to say. I was going to say fuel to their cylinder. I don't even think that is a saying.
Fuel to the fire?
Fuel to the fire. That's the one. That's the one that I was thinking, like the cylinder that you put the gasoline in. I don't even think it's called that. Anyway, gas tank.
And you kept going. You're like, no, the cylinder that you put that stuff in. No, fuel to the fire. So we decided to have some fun with some sayings and see if you actually know these sayings.
What are these called? Because I'm actually terrible at them. My husband is like, you need to have a book of like, are they idioms? Idioms. See, I knew they were. He's like, you just make your own idioms up. And I'm like,
yeah. You're like, don't you add fuel to that cylinder.
I'm confident in when they come out that people are like, is that an idiom or is she just an idiot? And I'm like, balance of the two. Okay,
well, let's have some fun. I'm going to start with you, Kaylyn. If you don't get it, I'm going to go to Laura. Laura, you are not off the hook on this one.
I'm not good here either.
All right. This one, I have to admit, I learned this one for the very first time like a year ago. I didn't even know about this one. Someone said it to me on air, and then I couldn't stop laughing.
Okay.
A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the...
A bird in the hand is... Oh, I know this. A bird in the hand... I'm going to know. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the... I'm going to pass the first one to Laura.
Laura?
I don't like birds, so I'm going to say fire.
No, stop. You are horrible. How dare you do that to the birds? All right. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush.
What is that supposed to mean, Andi?
Well, Google it.
I'm sorry.
Am I going to find something on Urban Dictionary that I don't want to know?
No, I have heard that.
It is a very
bush.
old saying.
It's super old. I think my husband said it to me. It's like they say it in England. I don't know. I'm like,
Have it
what?
in your hand. One in your hand is still better than two that are elsewhere, basically.
Oh, I thought it meant something. Never mind.
Yeah, I didn't think it was on that. Yeah.
I could have just totally made that up, and I love that you believed it. Anyways, all right, here's another one. A penny saved is a penny
earned.
Got it. All right. Come on now. Actions speak louder than
words.
Thank you.
Oh my God, 2 for 2 here.
Birds of a feather flock
together.
Wait, what were you going to say, Kaylyn? In the what?
In the weather? Is that where we were going?
Birds of a feather flock in the weather?
I was going to say flock better in the weather. I don't know.
Yes, birds of a feather.
Why are there so many bird-related ones?
Flock because we know you hate birds.
Okay, great.
Okay. Even a blind squirrel finds a
nut.
Yep.
No.
Well, you looked frightened there, Laura. Did you not know
I didn't
what it
know.
was?
I didn't know where we were going there.
I don't know what it means, but
even a blind squirrel finds a nut. Yeah.
Everyone's hungry.
I don't think that's what it means.
I don't think it has to do with I think it's just everyone gets lucky. You just all get lucky once in a while. Again, maybe I'm wrong on that. All right. Slow and steady wins the
race.
There we go.
Give me some hard ones, Andi.
Okay, so I think there's some sports ones here. I didn't make these up. I could have come up with some.
Did.
Do you know which one I always insist on using, but I keep screwing up and I don't even know the right words for it to even correct myself here. But I always say it's not how hard you get hit, it's how hard you fall and get back up.
No, it's something about getting back up. It's not how hard you get hit, it's about how
fast
you get back up.
And here's the thing, and I insist on using that, and I always screw it up.
You know which one I always use on broadcast when I'm calling games, and I always screw it up. She's made nothing out of something when it's something out of nothing. Always screw it up.
My
broadcast partner's always like, just go with it.
He's like, you completely got that wrong. Yeah. But we need a little George W. Fool me once, can't fool me again. Remember that one when he was trying to give?
Oh, never mind.
He's like, if you fool me once, shame on me. If you fool me twice, he's like, well, you can't. If you get fooled twice, you can't get fooled again. And he's just like, he doesn't know. Anyway, it's still the best. All right, some sports ones here. Let's just finish off. We should know these ones. We're just going to take it one game
at a time.
We're going to give it 110%. 110%. There we go. Then there's also the typical flying on all cylinders. And,
oh, yeah, that's very hockey. That's like your hockey answer. That's the hockey player. Like, how do you think the game went? Yeah, we were flying on all cylinders, got the puck in deep, and it was a good game. The boys did a great game. I'm like,
trust the process, you guys.
In deep. Yeah, trust the process.
Kaylyn said one earlier today, though, didn't she? She said, and
we're beeping that one. Thank you very much.
My bad. Sorry. Mom's and dad. Piano tied to your leg?
Oh,
my dad used to always say that.
My backside.
Oh, okay.
Means
my dad used to always say that. Do you have a piano tied to your leg? And I was like, well, I don't want to do it. So
I don't even. Okay, I'd never want a piano tied to my leg. How about that? All right. So we had a little bit of fun with that one. That was a good one. It was MLS opening weekend. How excited were we? I was glued to my television. It was fun times. When it comes to a Canadian perspective, tough loss for the Whitecaps. That was 4-0 to Columbus. They were down a man as well. CF Montreal also saw a red card. They ended up losing 2-0 to Orlando. Toronto FC with a 1-1 draw to FC Dallas. As we know, Toronto, a brand new team. Laura, biggest, let's do two things here. So it doesn't have to necessarily be with the Canadian teams. We can go around the league on this. But when you look at a positive from the weekend and a negative from the weekend, what stood out to you?
I am going to focus on the Canadian teams because I didn't watch any other games. Sorry, guys. But I could only put 3 in my calendar.
Okay.
I would say my big positive, my negative was Vancouver. They were chaotic. That scoreline's bad, and scoreline can be bad no matter what. And I know that they're trying out a new goalie, and Maxime's gone to LAFC, and that makes things a little bit difficult for them. But at the back, they were just a mess. So it's not really so much the scoreline for me, but just the way they lost. They're really gonna have to pull up their socks. Also an idiom, maybe, I'm not sure. Anyways, and then I enjoyed the TFC game, and I like the fact that Bob Bradley's playing teenagers. We've been having this conversation about TFC for like I feel like 2 or 3 years now, where it's like we're going to get these kids in the lineup, get these kids in the lineup, and then they sort of play bit part roles. Well, if Bob Bradley keeps going the way that he's going, then I mean they're not going to play bit part roles, and I think that's really going to be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like that. Kaylyn, are you with us? I think Kaylyn maybe lost her audio a little bit there.
No.
Oh, no.
Not again.
Kaylyn's audio. We're going to end up getting her back, but it's okay. Don't worry. See, now it's not just your language we have to beep out.
Yeah.
We're also going to fix this edit by Kaylyn. Are you back?
Sorry, I don't know why that happens when someone calls. I need to shut it off on here. Okay, I'm ready. Yep. Go.
Oh, yes. No one's allowed to call you during this time. Your positives and your negative takeaways from MLS opening weekend.
Okay, well, my first positive, Inter Miami, we didn't lose. So that is my first positive. With 18 players that got moved in the offseason, 12 new players coming in, I actually didn't think the second 45 was that bad. We actually looked like we had a style, we had a playing system. So that was my big positive, because the first 2 seasons with Inter Miami, it's obviously very difficult to be on a home broadcast with a team that has been struggling to turn things into a positive. So I'm delighted, because obviously Phil Neville, I love him. I love the organization. So I'm just delighted that all the hard work in the offseason is slowly paying off. I think it'll take some time for everything to start clicking on the pitch, but that's my big positive. It's like a positive negative. Toronto FC fans, Dom Dwyer in Atlanta was a joke. Now, I mean, first off, he got subbed in due to injury, but then the partnership with him and Martinez up top was literally scary. And everyone was saying, they're the same body type, they're the same body frame, they're short, they're explosive, they're not great in the air. They were the dynamic duo in that match and outplayed Sporting off the park. So scored on his old team, kind of went on trial with Atlanta after TFC ended his contract, ended up doing the whole preseason without a contract, got signed, and had an outstanding first performance with him. So it's a good and a bad thing for the TFC fans. They don't have to be too nervous. Obviously, you guys are getting a huge player, I will say. And when does he come? June or July?
July. July.
Yeah. Insignia. So that's obviously a huge thing for Toronto and all other teams. If you haven't seen him playing over in Italy, he was a joke last weekend as well. So that's another positive. So it's a positive negative for Toronto. And then the LA Galaxy game was unbelievable versus New York reigning champions. 1-0. Chicharito he showed up to the pitch looking like an absolute rock star. I mean, if you haven't seen his attire, it's phenomenal. And I was like, if you can wear that to a game, you have to show up and play. And just his post-match comments were just really inspiring as a player, because sometimes you get these big name players that come over and make everything about me. I'm amazing. I'm the best. Obviously dealt with injuries last year. Got the start for Galaxy, scored, and then he did a post-match interview with, I don't know who was on the broadcast for the game, I think ESPN, and they were like, how does Chicharito feel in a moment like this? And he was like, this isn't about Chicharito, this is about the LA Galaxy and where we want to move this team this season. I thought that was really cool for a player like that, and you could see the emotion in him. Obviously, he's a very emotional person, but he's been through a lot these last 3 years, so yeah, I have more positives than negatives. I'm just happy MLS is back, because it's grown so much and it's actually good football to watch. The tactics, the playing style, new teams coming in, the jerseys. I mean, just everything. I'm like a little kid on Christmas. I was like, this is awesome. I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah. Now, I just want to get to this very quickly here, because I know it's not MLS related. But I just want to get your thoughts as we look ahead, obviously, to end of March. We do have the final 3 games in the World Cup qualifiers. Canada, obviously, if they get that solid result against Costa Rica, they'll book their ticket to the World Cup. But there are 2 players who feature quite prominently in John Herdman's lineup. And these are also 2 players right now that aren't playing all that much. Richie Laryea making a huge move from MLS to Nottingham Forest in the championship. Hasn't featured yet, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think he's been on the bench. We know that Stefan Eustachio has been placed on, he's on loan, FC Porto. He too now with a stronger team. He's been playing, but not a lot. Now, word is as well that Richie would like to return to Toronto. We know that's not as easy as, some players obviously would like it, because as you know, if a player is sold, then when they want to come back, they have to go through an allocation process, and I don't even know where Toronto FC is. Bottom line is they're not first in being able to choose him. Kaylyn, where are you with, players who take this risk, take this jump to go elsewhere and maybe are not getting the results they want to see right away?
I don't think it's a risk. I think this is such a huge opportunity. And yeah, I guess you can maybe say there's no risk behind it. I mean, you're going to massive clubs. I mean, Porto and Nottingham Forest are two huge clubs. Now, are you going to get in the starting 11 straight away? Sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. And as these two players, I'm friends with Richie Larea. I know that he is hardworking. He's determined. He's grateful. He was honored with this move. He turned down the highest paid fullback job in the MLS to make this move. It takes time. Now, if Richie needs to speak to someone, don't speak to Toronto. Speak to Kyle Larin. He did it when he went to Besiktas. Didn't even get in the lineup. Wasn't playing. They sent him out on loan. I don't even know where it was, to a club where he didn't feel comfortable with. It was in a new place. He was like, I moved away from my family, out of the MLS, and quite frankly, put the MLS on a little bit of pressure to get him out, and kind of made his bed, continued to claw his way back in, went back to Besiktas, was a top goal scorer for that team, and ended up lifting the title the following year. So football moves so quickly. Players move in football so quickly. You look at Richie Larea with Toronto FC. Richie Larea has been through this. He wasn't playing in Orlando. He was barely making the bench. He was playing on Orlando City B team. He grinded it out, went to Toronto, didn't have a contract, went on trial there in preseason like Dom Dwyer did for Atlanta United, ended up signing with TFC, and was going to be one of the highest paid fullbacks in the MLS. Then that got him on the map for the Canadian men's national team. He wasn't even on the map for the Canadian men's national team until Toronto. So for Richie, grind it out. You're in an amazing club with so much culture. It's one of the biggest clubs in Europe. Yeah, you're going to have some growing pains. And yeah, maybe you're not getting the 90 minutes, but you're still in a training environment that is as good as the MLS, if not better. So if we're talking about 90-minute playing and not having that fitness, I mean, you saw what Canada did in the last window, where most of their players were out and weren't in season, including Richie Larea, and they still dominated the US. So take all of that stuff aside. When it comes to the national team qualifying for the World Cup, I don't think that will play an effect on it, because you're still training at a very high level, and John Herdman knows how to manage your minutes. But for Richie Larea, I mean, grind it out. And the thing is with that, is if you are reaching out to Toronto through your agents, or that always gets back to the club. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes you just have to bite the bullet. Idiom? Is that an idiom? Maybe not. And just suck it up. Get through it. You've been through it before. You've done this before. You're a fantastic player, one of probably the most exciting fullbacks in CONCACAF at the moment. So get through it. And I know Richie, and I'm not slating him, because I think he's an absolutely quality guy. Maybe this is just like rumbling behind the scenes.
Frustrated, right? Really, you're frustrated.
Yeah, it's frustration. Yeah. But for me, he's going to be completely fine. And I don't think we'll see him back in the MLS. I think if he has a good season over there, he'll even go to a bigger club in Europe.
Yeah. I mean, John Herdman has also said that he wants to have players in the top 5 leagues in the world, and currently the top 5 leagues in the world are in Europe. And if you get Richie Larea and Stephen Eustachio over into some of those leagues, or closer to those leagues, then, that's a good thing. John Herdman has literally sort of looked at past World Cup winning squads and figured out what percentage of those players play in, the Premier League and the Bundesliga and Liga and a couple of other leagues in Europe. So, I mean, I really think that Herdman and when it comes to back to the Canadian national team, they're going to have to understand that it's going to take a little while before these players get, maybe regular minutes sometimes in Europe. And that's just going to have to be okay if you want these players playing in those environments. When it comes to March, one of the things that we've talked about with this team is the fact that they're so deep, right? And we've seen Canada play without Stephen Eustachio and be a very good team and win games. And we've seen Canada play, without Richie Larea and be a good team. And they're certainly two of the team's biggest threats. But Canada should be
they did it without Alphonso Davies as well.
Yeah, exactly. Canada should be able to go into this window and clinch a berth. If two players make or break this team to the point where they're somehow not going to qualify, then we're in huge trouble. We're in way bigger trouble than we thought we were.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. I want to end on this. As we know, the CONCACAF Under-20 Women's Championship is happening right now. The top 3 teams qualify for the Under-20 World Cup this summer. The Canadians right now undefeated, 2-0. Big victories here as well. It was 7-0 over St. Kitts and Nevis, 4-0 over El Salvador. We taped this earlier in the day. Their third and final game is actually going right now against Trinidad and Tobago. But when you see this kind of play, Kaylyn, when you also see this kind of of dominance. How important are these types of tournaments for the development of Canada's next stars?
Huge. I mean, I went through 2 U20 World Cups, one in Russia and the other one, I forget where the other one was. Oh my God, that's terrible of me. But I think it preps you, right? So it preps you in tournament phase. It preps you in those round robins. It preps you in those 3 matches, then gets you to the quarterfinal, the semifinal, the final. So I think it's so important to have these types of tournaments, sometimes in difficult places. A lot of ours were in Mexico when I was growing up for the qualification for a World Cup. Chile, that was the other one. Chile and Germany, or Chile and Russia. But these are the type of things that you want to be in. You're in with a group for a month. You know, you have those knockoff games. It just builds you to prep for the full team. And I think that's something that I was so grateful for, because I got 2 cycles at it. I got 2 turns at it to get me fully prepared when I went into the women's national team, that I would be fully immersed in how tournament phases, because it's very different than college. It's very different than high school. I mean, provincial team, wherever they're playing at the moment. So I think it's crucial, and it's so beneficial for their development and their growth in order to hit that full women's national team peaking. And by the way, can I just say, Canada loves being top of the table right now at the moment. Like, we're like, it's like top of the table. It's like, it's normal now.
Yeah, that's the spot they like. That's for sure. Yeah, Laura, final word to you.
Well, I mean, speaking to that quickly, my prevailing memory of the Arnold Clark Cup will be Khadijah Buchanan at the end, like really pushing to try and win, and then like clearly angry when the final whistle went against Spain and she didn't win. And I was like, this lady knows how to win. She is ready to be back in winning ways. But I also think we got to remember, I think Bev Priestman has had a lot of hand. Her hand is all over these youth teams, right? Because she played in or she worked in Canada's youth system for so long. And I think that can only be great for the senior national team, because these players will eventually transition. They're going to get this experience. Bev Priestman was very clear that, you know, some of these players could have been at the Arnold Clark Cup with the senior team, but she wanted them to have this U20 experience because that's how important it is. And she's really setting them up, I think, for success. And we're going to see those transitions. There are going to be some players who are going to transition out of the national team, the senior national team, at some point soon in the next few years, we'd say. And these players are going to be ready, and that's incredible. That means a lot to the senior national team.
Yeah, a lot of times when you're successful at that first team, at that senior national team level, it's already starting here. You're already creating that culture already, at this level right here. And the Canadians so far looking good, looking to book their ticket to the Under-20 World Cup. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Great stuff as always. Kaylyn Kyle, Laura Armstrong. I'm Andi Petrillo. Thanks again for tuning into OneSoccer.ca.